The next range of motion that you might be missing a deadlift in is the middle of the range of motion. So generally you can get the bar moving off the floor fine, and as it approaches the knees, somewhere around that middle third part of the range of motion, around the knees, is where you miss your deadlift. It might be a strength thing or it might be a leverage thing. The two biggest technical cues here, if you're missing around the middle, are breathing, bracing, and keeping the lats tight. So if you're breathing and bracing properly, your back is going to stay in a nice, rigid, solid position. If you're not bracing properly, your back is going to start to round and it's going to put you in a compromised position. You're not going to be able to get the muscles going in the proper leverages you need to finish pulling that bar through your sticking point. And the other technical part, if you're not keeping the bar close to you, a lot of times this is when people will start to lose the bar out in front of them. If you're not maintaining that tightness, keeping the bar close to your center of gravity, it can start to drift away. And on the max effort deadlift, if that bar drifts a few centimeters or an inch in front of you, you've completely just annihilated any leverage advantage you have over it. So if you're the lifter that is missing a deadlift around the middle of the range of motion, here are the best exercises you can do to strengthen it. The first would be low block pulls. You could start with the blocks either 2 or 4 inches off the ground, somewhere that is a little bit below where your sticking point is. Learning to pull off the blocks like that, it's going to have to be another learning experience, like learning from a dead stop deadlift. Now you're going to have to learn to create that tension and leverage into the bar from a compromised position where you are not your strongest. So if you can learn to strengthen the pull, initiate the pull from a dead stop in a position where you're not strong or ideal, once you strengthen it, it will carry over to your full range deadlift. Another fantastic exercise if you're missing deadlift in the middle of your range of motion would be a Romanian deadlift. This is great because it's going to force you to keep your back in a nice, solid, strong position. So if that's not the reason you're missing the lift, it's going to put the emphasis on your low back, your glutes, and your hamstrings to really grease that groove and find out how you strengthen that lift and how you find that range of motion where it correlates especially over to your competition deadlift. Another thing it's going to do, even if you're missing deadlifts because your back is rounding, the RDLs are going to force you to execute that movement with a perfectly neutral spine that's locked in, which again is going to strengthen it. A third good exercise you can do if you're missing in the middle is pause at the knees deadlift. So I would find that pause that's going to be a little bit below your sticking point. So if you miss your deadlift just above the knees, I want you to hit that pause either just below the knees or at the middle of your kneecap. What that is going to do, it's going to force you to pause and make your body find an entire new emphasis on tension just below your sticking point. When your body finds that strongest position through muscle memory, that strongest position before your sticking point, now you start to grease that and your full range of motion is going to be stronger than ever below your sticking point, which will allow you to push through your sticking point. And finally, the fourth exercise I would recommend would be accommodating resistance deadlifts. The accommodating resistance deadlifts are great either with bands or chains because it's going to force you to drive that bar with maximal effort through the entire range of motion. You could be missing the deadlift around your knees or in the middle of range of motion because you're starting to lose some of that tightness, or maybe you put all your effort into breaking the bar off the ground and you don't have much muscle timing endurance to continue driving. What the bands will do is force you to lift that bar with 100% maximal force through the entire range of motion. So it will increase that muscle drive time that you have to fight through your sticking point. When looking for the muscle groups on why you may be missing a deadlift in the middle, one of the first ones to look at is the upper back. As you're transitioning through that middle portion of the deadlift, your torso is going through its biggest change of range of motion that it'll see during that lift. If your upper back isn't strong enough to stay rigid and stop from collapsing, then strengthening your upper back is going to help with that. The next muscle group to look at would be your hamstrings. So as that bar is transitioning past the knees, what you're going to have to start doing to lock out and finish transversing that bar across the knees is those hamstrings are going to have to start to dig in to help extend the hips. So strengthening those hamstrings are going to help drive that movement pattern that will involve the hips coming through earlier and help get through that middle sticking point. Finally, the last muscle group here I would say is going to be your glutes. So the glutes are going to be asked to do some of their most critical lifting of the deadlift as that bar is passing the knees. Your hips are going to be at a deep flexion at that point, and you're going to be transitioning away from quads as the knee starts to extend and have more requirements of driving the hips through. So strengthening those glutes is going to strengthen that weaker portion of the middle of your deadlift.